Hey everybody, Foley here. Welcome to the weekly news recap for the 27th of October to the 2nd of November 2025. I'm going to be real with you guys. I am pretty low energy right now. It's going to be just powering through this really. Anyway, so first up, there was a ID at Xbox showcase that was hosted by IGN. That is definitely not a conflict of interest. IGN showing your bias there a little bit too much. Anyway, so the ID at Xbox thing, if you're not familiar, is effectively indie games coming to Xbox. The ID at Xbox thing is brought in, I think, somewhere around the 360 era. That was kind of a pipeline for indie games making their way over to Xbox. So first up, we have Mouse PI. So this is kind of a deep dive into the game. It's kind of showing off like what the intention was for the early game and how the game has kind of progressed over time. And there's a couple of different interviews with some of the developers, some of the designers, and so on. It's pretty interesting. On the other hand, it is also quite long. So I'm going to skip past that, but it's there for your viewing pleasure if you so intend. Moving on. So a couple of games that kind of, not stood out necessarily, but were new to me or showed off some new things. So there's way more. If you want to see the full thing, the link is there in the description. So this is Puppergeist, which I thought was very fun, a very cute kind of game. It is actually a rhythm action game in some ways. You can kind of see that the characters there are moving to a beat. So you pet the dog to the beat. I think that should be pretty straightforward. That's probably the one thing I'll actually have rhythm for. The gist of it is, pretty grim. Your dog is dead. You've gone to the other side to find them. You may or may not be successful. That is a very cute dog ghost. So it's a little bit visual novel and a little bit like rhythm game. And yeah, it's got a cute presentation and I kind of like it, despite it being a game about, a dead dog, which is a bit grim. No release date for that. And even though like this is an ID at Xbox showcase, I would imagine most of these games will make their way to other platforms. We have Don't Fret. Now, Don't Fret, I think had been shown off before, but we hadn't seen any actual gameplay of it at the time. So Don't Fret is a little bit like My Friendly Neighborhood in some ways, but instead of Muppets, it's like musical instruments. So that's where the fret part comes in. It's a pun. You're a guitar, I think, as well, or whatever character you're playing is a guitar as well at the same time. Anyway, but yeah, it's a bit of like a first-person survival horror type thing, but done also like a little bit jokey, because all of the characters you'll be facing off against are different musical instruments and what have you. Probably not going to see a bunch of gore or anything like that, but a little bit scary. A lot of the puzzles are music based and that kind of thing. Any music based puzzle I've ever come across in survival horror has always been like the hardest one, like by far. Like definitely the tuning the clock tower in Resident Evil Nemesis. I always had to just guess. I always had to just guess what the answer was because I couldn't pick out the tune at all. Anyway, moving on. Darkwood 2. So this is a bit of a surprise announcement. If you're not familiar, the original Darkwood, it's like a top-down survival. Technically it's a survival horror, but not in the way you're thinking. Not in the Resident Evil way. Definitely more in a survivor type of DayZ, Minecraft kind of thing, like having to go out and forage for supplies and that kind of thing, while also trying not to die. And I always thought it's POV kind of mechanic that it has here, that you can only really see what's happening in that cone, and enemies can be sneaking up behind you and stuff like that. You might not be aware of it. And I always thought that was a really interesting mechanic, and I think the original game did it pretty well. Even though, again, because it was a survivor type thing, I wasn't really massively enthused. But I always enjoyed watching other people play it. Anyway, so Darkwood 2 on its way at some point in the future. And then last one I wanted to show, so Agni Village of Calamity. We have seen this a couple of times, or at least I've shown it a couple of times. And this is, I think, based in Indonesia. You're playing Agni, I believe, detective who's gone off in search of her sister. She gets kidnapped or drugged or something by this guy, and that's kind of where the game starts. You know, she's like kept in this kind of prison cell, and I think at the beginning he's like a nemesis type, where he's just kind of following you around for the early part of the game, but then later on it goes into a little bit more of like a monster thing, a little bit closer to Resident Evil, a little bit closer to Silent Hill type thing. The game also had, at least at the beginning of when they were showing it off and when they announced the game initially, it had a bunch of live action scenes. And I don't know if they're continuing with that and or if I'm mistaking it for a different game, which is entirely possible. There's one issue with this trailer in that it does not have subtitles. So they are all speaking. Display my ignorance now. I don't know what they speak in Indonesia. Is it Indonesian? Is that I don't know. If I hold my hand up, I don't know what the language is. Display my ignorance somewhat. This kind of creature that kind of chases you around here, you get like kind of small glimpses of it. It's kind of a flesh golem thing. You might recall in the earliest trailers that it speaks with a child's voice, and it kind of speaks with her sister's voice, who must be much younger than her. It's also a decapitated head there on a plate, so it's, you know, it's pretty fucking creepy. Anyway, this guy was a big reveal. He must be a well-known actor in the country. I don't know who he is. He has cool sunglasses though. I think this had a release date. Maybe not. No, we've hit the Xbox bar, so no, it didn't have a release date. Anyway, that was kind of the stuff that I found either new or interesting at the ID Xbox showcase. There was, of course, way more games shown off, so if you want to check those out yourselves, you can find it on IGN. Definitely not a conflict of interest. Right, moving on. Games outside of the ID at Xbox showcase this week, we have Lulan, the Cursed Sand, which is kind of like an isometric... It's not quite Diablo and it's not quite Souls, but it is definitely like a deliberate isometric combat game. And this is from a bunch of ex-developers from games I can't remember right now. There's like a ton of different, like, pretty well-known games. This is like veterans of those games. There's some kind of interesting here with Lulan. Like, you can see, at least on screen at the moment, that the character you're playing as is a Skellington. But there is also a mechanic where he does have skin, where he has sand, I guess, in place of his skin. So the cursed sand, it's probably some element to it as well. And I'm wondering if this is kind of a Sekiro type thing, in that you have one form where you have all the sand on your body, and then if you're downed, you return to the skeleton form for like one more try, and then I don't know, I guess if you win the fight, you get your sand body back or something like that. Maybe, I don't know, I'm speculating. We don't really know. You can see that while he has the sand body, he has all of these kind of magic abilities. Like, you know, the sand kind of returns to him when he has this kind of stuff. He can like phase through buildings and stuff like that. They didn't show any of that while he's in Skellington mode, so I don't know if it's a case of while you have the cursed sand, you have all of these powers, and if you're downed, you lose them, maybe, and you have like a chance to get it back. Don't know, not clear. It is fully speculation, but it does look pretty impressive. Just announced though, so we don't have a release date or a release window or anything like that right now. Also, this is kind of doing pretty well social media wise when it was shown off. This is The Florist. This is a kind of like an old school survival horror thing, but not with the kind of PlayStation 1 graphics that I think some people are getting a bit sick of seeing some of the survival horror games. So yeah, it's, you know, they're at least trying to go for a more modern graphical style. Whether they'll be able to, you know, still match the kind of levels of something like Resident Evil or the original Silent Hill and what have you, I would have had a lot of people working on it and a lot of money put in them. So, you know, tools have certainly come along since then, but I don't think it replaces having 50 people working on the game at once, you know? Anyway, yeah. But yeah, The Florist looked pretty good. But again, it's just an announcement trailer. We don't really know when or where it's releasing. So we're coming to the start of November. So the PlayStation Plus monthly games. So this is PlayStation Plus Essential. Games are being refreshed. So you have until Tuesday to grab, Alan Wake 2, Goat Simulator 3, and Cocoon. Because on Tuesday they'll be replaced by Stray, World Rally Championship 24, and Totally Accurate Battle Simulator that is anything but. So yeah, there's been a little bit of like saltiness, I guess, in the community about Stray because it's already part of the PlayStation Plus catalog. So for most people, I say most people, for anyone who's subscribed to PlayStation Plus higher than the Essential tier, this won't be a new game. Like everybody already had access to it, and it is the main game of November. It's pretty disappointing, especially when October was like Alan Wake 2 and Cocoon, which are both two very, very good games, and Goat Simulator 3 I have not played. I don't know if it's good or not. I've heard good things about it, but it does also seem like it's more of a get your friends together and fuck about type game, which that don't really interest me all that much. Anyway, World Rally Championship 4, I believe EA have like closed Codemasters a while ago at this point, so that's probably the last one of those you're gonna see anytime soon. And Totally Accurate Battle Simulator is kind of fun. It's a bit dumb, kind of sandbox slapstick kind of thing where you just put ridiculous armies against each other. And the totally accurate part is, of course, satire. It is in no way totally accurate. It's very dumb and very silly, and it's a fun time. But yeah, this is definitely a downgrade from October. Like Stray's a good game, but again, if you're subscribed to PlayStation Plus higher than the Essential tier, you've been able to play it since it came out. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing. Anyway, moving on. Over on the Epic Games Store, so the free games this week, there's two games actually. So it's Bendy and the Ink Machine. So this is a first-person horror type thing, kind of well before Poppy Playtime, I think, but it is a similar type of thing. So the gist of Bendy and the Ink Machine, I think, is that you're a returning artist to somebody who worked on the Bendy cartoon, which is basically Mickey Mouse, but they obviously aren't going to call it Mickey Mouse. The original one, and the ink that they were using has some sort of demonic thing to it, so the cartoons come to life and are now hunting you down thing. But yeah, it's a very similar to a Poppy Playtime type thing, only the game is finished and you can play it. And it's free on Epic Games Store. The second game is Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit, which is not really like the other type of Five Nights at Freddy's games. It's kind of like a adventure game in some ways, like the old school adventure games, the point and click type ones. So there's definitely like kind of puzzle elements to it, and there is some sort of time travel element. Like the Into the Pit thing is that you jump into the pit and you go back to when Five Nights at Freddy's, Chuck E. Cheese, was actually in business and working and what have you. And then jumping into the pit again, I think takes you into like modern day where it's, closed down and the animatronics are trying to kill everybody and that kind of thing. I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of this game, so I have no idea if it's actually good or not. But it's a different presentation, at least, to the typical Five Nights at Freddy's games. I don't know, it might be interesting, and if you're into the lore, it might, might have something new there. Anyway, those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you wanted to play something right now? Well, again, judging by concurrent players on Steam, it's a good chance you are already playing Arc Raiders. So this is from the same developers who made The Finals, which is also a type of extraction thing, I think. So Embark are all former DICE people, so, very familiar with Battlefield and what have you. And I think they branched off before Battlefield 2042, so make of that what you will. But yeah, Arc Raiders is a extraction type thing. It's a PvPvE business. You go into the zone, you collect all your loot and try to get away without dying and having people steal your loot and what have you. So as well as the PvP aspect of it, of you fighting other people also trying to loot things, you have the PvE aspect, which is these kind of big mech things that are walking around the map. And then there's like smaller ones, like kind of grunt type enemies, but there are definitely like big, massive robots just roaming the map that you might need a couple of friends to help with, or maybe a couple of enemies to help with as well. You know, you might team up and take down this mech and then have to fight over the spoils. I think it's an interesting concept. I was definitely more on board with the game when it was pure PvE. I think when it was initially announced, the idea would be that you drop in with a bunch of people to try to take down a big mech. And I guess, like, there was an interview with some of the developers more recently to say that, like, they didn't think it was fun enough to, like, sustain a long game, and they felt like the PvP element would have added a bit more longevity to it. And I guess that's probably true, but I don't like PvP. So that was the end of it for me, really. But yeah, I think there's been some, I think for the most part, it's been pretty well received. There's been some kind of issue with like the setting and the, what do they call it? The trash monkey aesthetic of you just grabbing cobbled together stuff, and it doesn't really feel cool, I guess. I don't know. But they are taking the same line as Battlefield on the not having crazy skins like you might have seen in like Warzone or the Finals, which is their other game. And I think Arc Raiders, like Embark, might be able to like actually stick to that because they do have the Finals for that kind of thing. Battlefield has been sort of scraping up against the line on what counts as a zany, wacky outfit. And I think there's a little bit of sensitivity in the community about it. Like any kind of straying into not one-to-one recreations of military outfits is kind of seen as a zany costume. Like I think there was one recently that had it was a blue camo print rather. That was like a pretty saturated blue, you know, it was almost like a royal blue color, and I don't think that does exist IRL. Like there are blue camo prints, it's just not that one. And it was quite blue, it was pretty, you know, visible and what have you, and I guess oversensitivity because we have things like, you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Family Guy and whatever running around in Warzone, and you've like The Simpsons, I think, running around in Fortnite right now. And I guess there's like a sensitivity there to be like, let's not copy them. Anyway, we're getting a little bit off topic because we're meant to be talking about new releases. All right, anyway, that's Arc Raiders. Also out this week, a ton of indie games. So we first up, The Seance of Blake Manor. This is a detective type game. You're brought in at Blake Manor. Something's gone wrong at the seance, and you have 2 days, I think, to try to figure out what's going on. Talk to people, you know, do kind of investigations and what have you. I don't think there's like an enforced timeline. I'm not sure. I haven't played the game yet, so I'm not entirely sure myself. But maybe there is. I think there might be a kind of thing of like when you talk to people, it advances the clock. But you have a bit of time to be like in between doing a bit of like detective work and finding evidence and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, it's pretty grim. It's pretty, you know, spooky for the this time of year. Silly Polybeast, I talked about it a little bit when I saw it the first time, because it's got a lot of like pretty strong personality to it and a lot of different kind of game types. You know, because there is like it's a twin stick shooter in some ways, and then sometimes it's a top down twin stick, sometimes it's a side scroller ones, then there's like a skateboarding section, you know, like a Tony Hawk's almost kind of thing, and then it has a little bit of like a visual novel to it. This trailer's not doing a great job of kind of showing any of that off. Yeah, so I'm not actually sure what kind of genre the game is. I think it's sort of like a twin stick shooter type thing, but it has very obvious horror elements to it. But yeah, I'm interested to play this, so we'll see when I finally get around to checking it out. Also, continuing with the survival horror element, I mean, it is this week contained Halloween, so a lot of the new releases are going to be horror type things anyway. So this is Flesh Made Fear, and sort of it's kind of emblematic of the thing I've been talking about, of people taking the old school survival horror stuff like the PSX graphics, the tank controls, fixed camera angles, that kind of thing, and putting in all of those trappings, which are, yeah, definitely part of old Resident Evil, old Silent Hill, and what have you, but you're not really... You don't get the vibe of it, I guess. Like, for one thing, there's way too many enemies on screen. Like, there's no way you'd fit that many enemies on screen with the PlayStation. I think for some aspects of it, it's not understanding why tank controls were a thing in the first place, and why the game is balanced around those tank controls. Now, I could be wrong about Flesh Made Fear, and maybe it's a very good game, but I've seen a lot of these old school survivor horror games come out, and some of them get it and some of them don't, and some of them get it to different aspects and what have you, and some of them are like amazing. Like Signalis is incredible survival horror game, and Hollow Body, that we're still in the middle of playing, is very good, but it kind of has its own atmosphere. I know it's billed as somewhat of a like Silent Hill throwback, but I think it has its own kind of identity. Whereas I think a lot of these games are looking at what did Capcom do and what did Konami do, and let's just copy them. Anyway, speaking of copying things, no, that doesn't make sense. Speaking of old school, I guess, yeah. Anyway, so there's a bunch of remasters, re-releases, and stuff like that. So Mortal Kombat, the Legacy Collection is, I think, like all of the Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3 games, and Mortal Kombat Trilogy. So it's like all of the arcade releases and then like the console releases. So like the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, 32X, bunch of the handheld like Game Boy games and stuff like that. There you go. There's all the games. There's a lot of them. Oh, Mortal Kombat 4 is on it. Wasn't expecting that. There's a few of those are like 3D games. Maybe they're the Game Boy versions that probably weren't 3D. But yeah, that's a lot of games. And on top of that, there's actually a really cool like documentary on Mortal Kombat. And they interviewed a lot of the people that are core to the series. Anyway, yeah, it's a really good presentation. Some of the games a bit buggy, and there has been there's been some people annoyed with like how difficult the arcade versions of the games are, and I'm like, as someone who played them, yeah, they're hard. The arcade versions of Mortal Kombat 2 in particular were like, fuck you, difficult. Yeah, so they've kept that up at least. Also a remake, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD remake being released as a bundle. So these are technically, there's kind of way to put it, like Dragon Quest 3 came out, or the Dragon Quest 3 remake came out first because it's technically the earliest time in the plot line of the 3 games. The 3 games are together, kind of tell a cohesive story in some ways. But obviously Dragon Quest 1 was the first game, and Dragon Quest 3 is kind of a prequel to the first one. Anyway, very good presentation of games that were already pretty good in the first place. Whatever we can say about later Dragon Quest and that how the formula hasn't really evolved massively. The original games still hold up pretty well. And the last one, Tales of Exilia, also remastered. What I've seen of this remaster is that there's not a huge difference in this. Like if you played the original game, it's the same game with like maybe better textures and like better runtime, or not better runtime, better performance. I think for any reason it might be just to have all of the DLC together, but I think the DLC for the game was just costumes. Like I don't think there was like extra. I don't think there were extra scenarios or stuff like that for the original Tales of Exilia. I liked the original one. I played it a lot. Didn't get around to playing the sequel, and that's kind of the one I'm more interested to see if they decide to remaster it. So while it does kind of continue on Tales of Exilia, it's not really a sequel. It's almost self-contained. A couple of characters in couple of characters that are in common, but you know, the events of Tales of Exilia are largely wrapped up in Tales of Exilia. Anyway, moving on. Unfortunately, though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games, the video game industry. So, you may have heard earlier this week that Amazon laid off a fucking ton of people. Amazon to shed 14,000 jobs to be organized more leanly, despite acknowledging it is performing well. So yeah, this isn't about cost cutting. Except it sort of is, and we'll get into it in a minute. So 14,000 jobs alleged to be around. I don't think we know the exact number yet. And the reasoning given is to get even stronger by reducing people, by further reducing bureaucracy, removing layers, and shifting resources to ensure we're investing in our biggest bets and what matters most to our customers' current and future needs. Now, we'll get to the customer bit in a second, but reducing bureaucracy and removing layers could be done without laying off 14,000 people. You could just say, hey, you don't need to put in that form anymore. Hey, you don't need to get sign off on this thing from this person anymore. Removing layers, take the vice part off all of the executive names. There you go. You've removed a whole layer of management right there. Like, it was not necessary to get rid of people. Shifting resources to ensure we're investing in our biggest bets. That's AI. That's like Amazon's deal with like Perplexity and stuff like that. Or Amazon Web Services and that kind of thing. What matters most to our customers' current and future needs? Yeah, speaking about current needs, they like canceled a bunch of projects that people were using and playing, which suggests that maybe you're not investing in your customers' current needs. Anyway, Senior Vice President of People, Experience and Technology. Fuck kind of title is that? Anyway, Beth Galetti had to say that the overall reduction in our corporate workforce of approximately 14,000 roles. This will result in a significant role reductions across Irvine and San Diego offices, which includes basically the gaming division of Amazon, which is why we're talking about it here. This reduces the amount of work it does on big budget titles, particularly surrounding MMOs. So we're talking about MMOs because Amazon basically has one game right now. And it's New World. It came out in 2021. It was a MMO that's not unlike The Elder Scrolls Online in some ways. Don't come at me, I never played it. I don't know if it actually plays that way, but it certainly had the presentation of it. So the layoffs themselves, the 14,000, is kind of affecting pretty much everything on Amazon. So this isn't just, like, there weren't 14,000 people working in the games division of Amazon. If anything, there were like 0 people working. If their output is anything to go by, nobody was working there. Anyway, so human resources, operations, devices and services, whatever that is, and Amazon Web Services, which I guess, since there was a massive outage of Amazon Web Services, maybe you laid off the wrong people for that one. Anyway, so New World confirmed that it will receive no further content updates, despite the game having only kind of fairly recently launched on Xbox and PlayStation. And for being an MMO, you kind of expect them to have longevity kind of built in. Like they're meant to be around for a long time. Although having said that, the sheer number of failed MMOs after Warcraft came out and was like a big success, and then, as is the games industry's wants, got to jump on the bandwagon. Everybody needs to build an MMO, despite, you know, the very obvious finite resources and time that people have to play all of those MMOs. It's not like they just fully repeated the same thing with live service games and hero shooters and all of that stuff. Yeah, we're definitely not seeing literally the same problem again. Anyway, it had recently come off a 12-month high for concurrent players over on Steam, but who cares? I'm just going to shit-can the game now. So no further updates. Developers are being let go. Like, New World is effectively dead, and I think they are planning to turn the servers off at some point pretty soon as well. Anyway, employees have about 90 days to secure a new internal job, which is a weird way to put it. Like, this sounds like it's the employee's job to secure an internal job in Amazon instead of the shitheads who are trying to lay them off. Like, it should be their job. It should be management's job. It should be HR's job to find a new spot for them in the company. Anyway, 90 days, 3 months, so Christmas. Nice, very nice. Anyway, they are offering severance, outplacement services, health insurance benefits, whatever. It'll be whatever they're legally required to do, I would imagine. And then they get to what is the actual reason for the layoffs. Of course, they don't say that because it's corporate bullshit, but the real reason is AI. This generation of AI is the most transformative technology we've seen since the internet. Jesus Christ. Asterisk, citation needed. Where are your sources on this? And it's enabling companies to innovate much faster than ever before. Citation needed. What was Amazon's last innovation other than these 14,000 layoffs? What have they done that's new? What have they done that's innovative? You would think since it's AI, you just type in your prompt to press a button and it does the thing, right? That's the whole deal. And yet, we're not seeing these billion-dollar companies spring up overnight. We're not seeing GitHub repositories of Vibe code. You would have seen a big spike of it. We don't. It's not happening. Why? Because the technology can't do that. Anyway, some may ask why we're reducing roles when the company is performing well across our businesses. We're delivering great customer experiences every day, citation needed, innovating at a rapid rate, citation needed, and producing strong business results. Their last earnings report was pretty dire for Amazon, so we actually have a citation for that one, and it's no, it isn't. So what's the real reason for all these layoffs? They need more money for AI. That's the real problem. So Amazon Web Services is probably the thing that makes Amazon most of their money, significantly. Like, they make way more profit off Amazon Web Service than they do from like the retail site or any of their other various services, Prime Gaming, that kind of thing, Luna, that nobody ever heard of, that kind of thing. And they need more liquidity to pump into generative AI, and they can't really increase the margins on retail because the margins on retail are just really slim anyway. So trying to push those up is not really going to happen. And Amazon Web Services, in a large way, already relies on generative AI compute. So you can't really increase the profit you're getting out of that without hurting the market in some ways for generative AI. And on top of that, they don't have enough chips. Like, they're competing with Google, they're competing with Microsoft. To some extent, they're competing with Meta for NVIDIA's chips. So Amazon needs cash, basically, now, so that it can either buy more chips or pump more money into Amazon Web Services, get some data centers up and running and what have you. And to also just, pay the exorbitant salaries of shithead executives. So the only real way to do that is to look at the fixed cost items on their list. Like, what things can they cut that cost them pretty much the same thing all the time? And that, for pretty much every business, that's salaries. And cutting salaries, it's not the same as just, hey, you're going to be paid 10% less now, whatever. Like, no one's going to agree to that. And instead, it's just going to be, we're laying you off. Like, that'll be it. And that will free them up a little bit of, it'll give them a little bit of cash injection they can use to try to buy more chips, or push more compute through Amazon Web Services for generative AI shit. So, generative AI is taking your job in some ways at Amazon, but not in the way that they're telling you. Like, it's not doing your job for you. It's taking your job because they need the salary they would have paid you to throw in the AI hole. This bubble needs to burst, like, real fast. Anyway, moving on. Microsoft boss explains Xbox's controversial new approach to gaming. So this was an interview with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, talking about the fuck is going on with Xbox. Now, we didn't put it that way. but arguably that's what the interview was about. And I thought it was notable in one particular way that I'll get to in a second. But anyway, CEO Satya Nadella just outlined 3 of the core principles that will seemingly guide the new era of Microsoft gaming. And to be honest, it's nothing new. Although Kotaku do point out here that the CEO is in line to receive $100 million in equity for doing fuck all by laying off people, which is great. Anyway, so they're talking about how Microsoft, because it, owns Windows and the vast majority of PC gaming is done on Windows, that there'll always be like massive business in the games business, just because PC gaming happens for the most part on Windows. So saying things like, Steam, Epic, GOG, like all of them sit on top of Windows for the most part. So they're always going to have some kind of inroad into PC gaming. Notably, Xbox is not mentioned in any of that. Obviously, after acquiring Activision Blizzard, he said this before, that made Microsoft one of the biggest gaming publishers in the world. This was also cited by a great number of regulatory bodies that it gave them way too much power. They pushed ahead with the merger anyway. But yeah, kind of in other words, kind of summed up a little bit here. It's basically say that the Xbox brand itself, probably fucked, but Microsoft itself, Microsoft Gaming, if you like, it's doing pretty great. Doing pretty good, actually. So direct quotes, "We want to be a fantastic publisher, similar to the approach of what we did with Office, because that was so well received. We're going to be everywhere on every platform. We want to make sure, whether it's consoles, whether it's the PC, whether it's mobile, whether it's cloud gaming, the TV, we just want to make sure the games are being enjoyed by gamers everywhere. Not a single mention of the word Xbox in all of that." Anyway, a much longer quote here. Again, he doesn't mention the word Xbox at any point. He does say something very silly here, saying that gaming's competition is short-form video. So he's trying to say that Microsoft is not in competition with PlayStation. Microsoft is not in competition with Nintendo. Microsoft is in competition with TikTok. No, you're not. That's like saying books are in competition with TikTok or music is in competition with TikTok. Anyway, the last line here, though, is probably the most telling. So he's talking about distribution, how they go about making games and like the economics of it, and saying that the best way to innovate is to have good margins because that's the way you can fund. So we're not going to put any money into it unless you already have good margins. Okay. Anyway, for anyone who's been paying attention to Xbox over the last year or so, yeah, there's nothing new here. We already knew they were trying to diversify and make, this is an Xbox messaging kind of thing happen, which obviously won't rely on the console so much anymore. The idea of a next-gen Xbox that sports a more open PC gaming ecosystem offers a lot of promise, even if it's priced at a premium. This was like talking, I think last week, Sarah Bond was talking about it, that like the next Xbox console will likely be a niche product and priced as such, be like north of $1,000, probably something like that. Look at the Asus ROG Ally, and that's probably what you're looking at as the new Xbox. The talk of higher profit margins shows this new direction comes at a cost. So we did talk about this last week, the 30% profit margin thing that apparently Xbox has been having to deal with for like 2 years now, pretty much since they acquired Activision for way too much money and saw definitely not enough return on that investment. Microsoft have been like, yeah, but where's my money though? When are you getting my money? Are you getting my money soon? Over the last 18 months, it's meant many cancelled games and shuttered studios and thousands of layoffs. So this way to innovate is to have good margins. All this innovation has resulted in no games. This is the way we can fund things, by not funding them, by cancelling the projects. Okay. Anyway. Treating Halo, so this is more of an editorial piece here, but treating Halo like Microsoft Office and shipping it everywhere might be exciting to investors, but it's not going to win much goodwill from existing fans who just saw Game Pass nearly double in price. So again, a lot of stuff for we're beholden to our shareholders and investors, and not a lot of, you like our product, we're going to make our product better so you'll buy more product. You know, the thing you're meant to be in business for. Anyway, I did say there was like a notable thing. It's basically just that for the entire interview, he didn't say the word Xbox. At least when talking about video games in the future for Microsoft, he didn't mention Xbox. Moving on. EA employees mock company mandate to use AI. So this is kind of news from... With the news that EA was going to be acquired by Saudi Arabia, effectively, that EA was trying to sweeten the pot and trying to say that, hey, you can make up your entire investment by just pivoting to AI. Just do everything with generative AI, and it'll be fine. You'll definitely make back $55 billion, despite the fact that Microsoft has not made back its $69 billion from Activision in I don't know how many years. Generative AI has been out a long time. You think you would have just tap, 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 done. Strange. Didn't happen. Anyway, Electronic Arts employees are reportedly frustrated and even mocking the company internally over its push to use more generative AI in its development and other areas of work. Higher-ups at EA have spent the past year urging its nearly 15,000 employees to use generative AI for just about everything. This includes code, concept art, even scripting conversations with direct reports about sensitive topics such as pay and promotions. Wow, now we've got a union-busting generative AI bot. Amazing. What great innovation we are seeing from this new generation of AI. Anyway, employees who spoke honestly to the outset said that they were encouraged to use the in-house chatbot, despite it producing flawed code and other so-called hallucinations that they needed to correct. It's a reminder that they're not hallucinations. That is literally the product working as it was designed to work. It didn't make a mistake. It is just producing statistically correct thing. Correct isn't even the right word. Statistically probable responses. No attempt at verification because it can't do it. No attempt at checking if the code even fucking compiles. Anyway, people on the more creative side of things were saying that people in design saying that they are expected to train the generative software on their own created work. And you might say that, we're going to train my replacement. Amazing. Not to mention that it must have some other issues in that. Now, it might be the case that if you're a designer working for like a bigger corporate entity, that you don't necessarily have, an ability to put your own style on things. Like maybe a better known artist might be able to get away with it. But if you're just Joe, whatever, working for a big corporate thing in design, it's not likely that you're going to be able to put your own style on things. So training a generative AI on your own unique style, even if it does put you out of business, it has also the other problem of not only have you lost your job at this corporate thing, but you've now trained a machine that can replicate your own style. Now, luckily, generative AI is shit at that, but executives are also stupid and are also totally happy with just eating the shit that comes out of the generative AI thing because they think you are stupid. Anyway, I was saying that executives are stupid. I do believe that some of them definitely are, but some of them recognize that actually using this generative AI stuff and pushing it isn't to actually replace people so much as it is to just drive down the value of labor. So that you will take a job that pays you much, much less because there's the threat of the AI thing doing it instead. And I think that's the real Trojan horse of generative AI, IMO, that I don't think it's a case of them trying to create... obviously that's what they would want overall, is like to just completely replace human capital with virtual human capital, I guess. But in the interim, it will have the kind of downward pressure on the power of labor. Anyway, yes, so there's a threat then that obviously of training this generative AI software will replace them. So ultimately would lead to the company no longer needing that type of talent. One former employee alleges that that's exactly what happened. The senior QA staffer at Respawn claims that the generative AI was able to perform a key part of his job, which was reviewing and summarizing feedback from hundreds of playtesters. Now, being able to review and summarize feedback, again, no, it can't. It's going to take a lot of the words. It's going to feed it into what's the next statistically probable word to come after this and do that. That's not reviewing. Certainly not critically reviewing somebody who would have training in that side of things. But again, they don't care. They really don't care. Anyway, so we were talking about like mocking. There hasn't been a lot of mocking so far, so we're going to talk about the mocking part now. So the mandate within EA to use generative AI has led to a mocking among employees. There's been a meme sent around on the company Slack that Business Insider was able to get a hold of, and it's basically a meme posted last month to a Slack channel for employees of Electronics Arts shows a cartoon man asking a trio even of CEOs what they want. They answer in unison, AI. Then the man asks, AI to do what? The CEOs reply, we don't know. The man follows, when do we want it? The CEOs cheer again, right now. So yeah, we don't know what we want, but we want it right now. Is that mocking? I don't know. But anyway, dozens of the company, replied with the laughing emoji. I know, is that really mocking, or is that just, hey, get a load of our managers? They're shitheads. Big shock. EA declined to comment, which is, of course, shocking. Anyway, moving on. A company taking a slightly different approach to EA, and AI. Take-Two's CEO doesn't think GTA built with generative AI would be very good. No, it wouldn't. It's not going to stop them doing it, though. Anyway, such models inherently lack creativity. So this was part of a speech, or not a speech, part of a roundtable, I think, at the Technology Executive Council Summit. I can't think of a more vacuous collection of people who ever attended that kind of thing. But anyway, he was asked about the impact of generative AI has had on video game development and if there's any way it could actually improve production or anything like that. Again, I would say if it was true, you would see it. You're not seeing it, ergo, it's not true. Anyway, what do you have to say? Let's say that there were no constraints on generative AI. Could we push a button tomorrow and create an equivalent to Grand Theft Auto and the marketing plan and just here it is? The answer is no. A, you can't do that yet. You can't do that ever. And B, I am of the view that you wouldn't end up with anything very good. You end up with something pretty derivative. Whether people in Silicon Valley like to hear this or not, generative AI is big data sets with lots of compute attached to a large language model, so what are datasets by definition? They're backwards looking. I mean, he's not wrong. Anything that involves backward looking data compute and LLMs, generative AI is really good for. No, it's not. Again, statistic probability stuff. None of it is actually clarifying. None of it is fact seeking. Like, none of it is in any way corralled into actual usable stuff. All of it has to be checked. All of it has to be babysat. In no way can you just let this do its thing, because it will be wrong all the time. Anyway, that applies to lots of things that we do at Take-Two. Anything that isn't attached to that, it's going to be really, really bad at. It's going to be really bad at it anyway. There is no creativity that can exist by definition in any generative AI model because it is data-driven. I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but I mean, he got to the right answer. Just maybe not the right way. Anyway, speaking of not the right way, I guess, because we're still talking about Rockstar. Rockstar have been accused of union busting after the firing of more than 30 staff members. So, This is a story coming from Bloomberg that a number of employees have been allegedly fired, not laid off, fired, within the, and then the UK's IWGB, I forget what it stands for, but it's a game workers union, claims that it was an act of union busting. Rockstar have declined to comment. Tutu? Surely that should be Take-Two. Take-Two, Rockstar's parent company, have denied that it was an act of union busting. Sorry, it's not that they declined to comment; they just declined to agree that it was union busting. So it's alleged that more than 30 staffers have been terminated. This is across UK and Canada, just pretty late in the week, Thursday. Bloomberg notes, however, that all of these employees were apparently part of a private Discord group chat revolving around trade unions, with members of this group either part of IWGB or were currently attempting to organize at Rockstar. It's not an act of union busting, though. Definitely not, despite all of them being part of this one chat. Now again, it's not clear if everybody who was involved in that chat was fired, if this is the reason they were fired, or anything like that, but that is what IWGB are alleging. So Alex Marshall, president of IWGB, alleges that Rockstar has just carried out one of the most blatant and ruthless acts of union busting in the history of the games industry. This flagrant contempt for the law and for the lives of the workers who bring in their billions is an insult to their fans and the global industry. Take-Two's spokesman, Alan Lewis, claimed that they were fired for gross misconduct. However, he did not follow up with what gross misconduct. There does not appear to be any specifics over what said gross misconduct might have been shared. So, yeah, we don't know. Definitely not union busting, despite them all being part of a union advocacy chat in Discord. Sure. Okay, so what's going on outside the games industry? Over in the gaming community, Nintendo wins lawsuit against player who kept streaming pirated Switch games and taunted, "I can do this all day." Well, not anymore. So this is kind of a lawsuit, I think, that started like a couple of years ago. So it's 2022 is when all of the shit started, but I don't think the lawsuit started then. Yeah, we don't have the year when the lawsuit itself actually started. But anyway, so Nintendo claimed that Jesse Keegan, going by Every Game Guru, it's claimed that he would stream games on various online platforms under his username, yada, 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 and that he would be streaming games that are leaked games. So the games hadn't actually been released yet. So at least 10 of Nintendo's leaked games before they were released to more than 50 times in total. This including the most recent one, that's time of the lawsuit, was Brothership. Keegan also taunted Nintendo, very smart, sending them a letter boasting that he has 1,000 burner channels to stream from and can do this all day. He would later taunt them on social media, saying that "you should have done more research on me. You might run a corporation, I run the streets." This guy's just a fucking dumbass, isn't he? All right, anyway, in April of this year, Nintendo filed a motion claiming that Keegan had evaded service of the complaint, so he avoided being, served papers, basically. And Nintendo got around this by sending letters to his mom, his grandmother, and his partner. Good shit. I mean, I'm not sure that counts, but I guess the court agreed that it counted anyway. The court has entered a default against him as of March of this year, basically saying that you failed to respond to any of the served papers. Apparently these letters counted as service of, or notice, I guess, to appear in court. And they've awarded Nintendo $17,500 in damages, which is really low. And we'll get to why the number is so low in a bit. Nintendo were looking for permanent injunctions against him as well. But the court actually pushed back on them for reasons that Nintendo should know by now, since it's come up so often, but they keep trying to make it happen. Basically, it's because he used emulation software that is already available online and is used for a great many other things that are perfectly legal. You can't just have him destroy all of these devices. because you'd effectively having him destroy a PC, which is overkill for what he was doing. The request was unclear and unreasonable, so the court didn't push for it. There was another one to try to get him to, it was to try to get third parties also served a permanent injunction, but because Nintendo never said who the third parties were, court said no. It's basically saying, I think in some way it was trying to get Nintendo were trying to just say, hey, you're not allowed to do this. Just in general, and that's what the third party part was for. But yeah, way too vague and no specifics. Court said no. So why such a small number for Nintendo, who, remember, we talked about it last week, were getting like millions in damages. Not getting the actual money, just ruining people's lives, who would be bankrupt for the rest of their life, basically. And yet they didn't call in the big guns for this one for some reason, despite it arguably being more damaging to them, because these are games that haven't come out yet. And that are actually accessible and playable and purchasable, probably more apt, despite Nintendo going after people for like ROMs, and they aren't selling those anymore. Like there's no way to legally acquire them anymore. Anyway, why only 17,500? Nintendo said that they were like fully in their rights to seek damages for every infringing game, which would have been 10 games, 10 grand per game, 100 grand. Didn't get it, or didn't go for it, rather, specifically. Instead, it only asked for 10,000 for the latest infringement, which was Brothership, as well as the multiple violations of anti-piracy security, which they claim was $500 per violation, 500 times 15, 7,500. Lump them together. Yeah, no like 100 like ROMs being sold versus 10 grand per ROM, some bullshit. So $2.8 billion, Your Honor, shite that they pulled and got away with in a bunch of other courts. Why didn't they go for it there? You know, they said that they could have done it and they didn't. In similar circumstances where defendants knew about but repeatedly ignored copyright notices and encouraged and assisted others infringement but failed to appear, courts in this district have awarded significantly statutory damages to Nintendo. Here, an award of 10k is eminently reasonable for defendants' blatant streaming of Nintendo's video game. It's particularly reasonable since Nintendo is electing not to seek damages for infringement of the other 9 works to which Nintendo has established liability. Why didn't they have that? Why didn't they take that position on the other ones? You know, why go out of your way to ruin somebody's life? Now, it's not like that much money isn't, you know, also a big problem. Like, I wouldn't be able to. It's not that I wouldn't be able to, but you know, it would put me out for quite a bit. But, you know, Nintendo famously litigious and didn't go after them. Either, again, speculation, they didn't think they'd get that much money, or they wouldn't be awarded it, or they didn't have the evidence for it, or I don't know. But why the courts were happy to rubber stamp the, like, millions damages for games that are the only way to play them is to pirate them. Anyway, this last one, also not a particularly happy feeling story. Former Halo devs call the ICE memo despicable. A call to destroy people because of their immigration status goes way too far. So this is kind of a US-focused thing that the Department of Homeland Security in the US posted a Halo meme as an ICE recruitment ad. So, the Gestapo, basically the US Gestapo, more or less, likening immigrants to violent aliens. Microsoft hasn't said shit about it. That's a appropriation of their IP, a very well-known IP. It's almost synonymous with Xbox. Microsoft have said nothing. Anyway, the ad in question shows Master Chief and another Spartan in a warthog with a call to destroy the Flood. The Flood being an enemy in Halo, which is described as like a zombie-like wave of creatures that just take over and destroy everything. And they're trying to claim that, yeah, that's illegal immigrants, lol. Pretty gross. Anyway, while Microsoft have stayed mum on the word, which is tacitly an endorsement of it. I mean, silence is endorsing the status quo. The status quo here being that it's totally okay for them to use that ad. Halo's co-creator, Marcus Letho, did speak up, called it absolutely abhorrent. It makes me sick seeing Halo co-opted like this. Jamie Griesemer, lead designer for Halo 2 and Halo 3, using Halo imagery in a call to destroy people because of their immigration status goes too far and ought to offend every Halo fan, regardless of political orientation. I personally find it despicable. The Flood are evil space zombie parasites. They are not an allegory to any group of people. And of course, the shitheads had to come back and say, oh, but lol, Halo's about 9/11 and it's totally against like jihad and this kind of stuff. He's like, no, you absolute idiots. The prophets are not popes. The grunts are not Wahhabis, and the Flood are definitely not illegal immigrants. The Master Chief is not Christ, and Cortana is not, I don't know, the Virgin Mary, I guess, you know where we're going with this allegory, to basically say that the people who are actually created Halo don't agree. But the company responsible for it is like, yeah, don't hurt any of our AI appropriation funds here. The tech giant is pledging support for Trump's White House demolition and the building of a new ballroom as it seemingly tries to curry favor for government contracts and regulatory approvals related to its spiraling AI investments. So that's why they're staying quiet. Happy to come after everybody else for copyright infringement, and as soon as it's going to hurt their bottom line, they don't. That's not how copyright works. And that's also not how ethics works. Anyway, we'll leave Arc Raiders because it's probably the bigger game this week. Anyway, that was your news for the 27th to the 2nd of November 2025. Some interesting stuff there from ID at Xbox. Kind of problematic that IGN were hosting it, I think. I don't think they should have had anything to do with it, but here we are. What's bias? What's a conflict of interest? I never heard those words before. Lulan, Cursed Sand, we're only really seeing the beginning of it. I forget who is involved in it, but I do remember when I read it, I was like, So, I think it might be interesting if we see a little bit more of it. The Florist, another take on like old school survival horror, but with like more modern graphical stylings, more, higher fidelity and what have you. But again, if it's just taking the trappings of survival horror and not kind of understanding the vibe of it, it might just feel like another attempt at it. We'll see. Yeah, some new releases. I'm not super into Arc Raiders, to be honest. Again, as I said, the PvE aspect of it, when it was initially announced, I was kind of more interested in, but as soon as they added another P, I'm out. It's like a threesome. There's 2 P's in it. I don't want to be involved. Yeah, anyway, there's some other good games showed off there. I'm pretty happy with the Mortal Kombat collection stuff being out and having all of those games available on PC and not kind of spread out all over the place. And like the documentary, I've been meaning to watch it myself. I think it's pretty cool. I think we should see more of it from like every game, really, arguably, but certainly a lot of the more, big hitters in the industry, because the video game industry is like very secretive, like overly secretive compared to pretty much every other industry. And like you can say like, films as they're being filmed are very secretive, but once the film's done, they're pretty open about like, processes of like what was happening on set and stuff like that. But unless it was controversial, I suppose, then they're a bit silent about it. But for the most part, you do get like, cast interviews and stuff. And you used to get that kind of thing on DVDs and what have you. And you just very rarely see any of it for video games, unless they're actively promoting a game. You don't typically see it for very old games. Anyway, industry bullshit, more layoffs, more executives not taking responsibility for the mistakes they made. There was an interview with one of the heads of Amazon's gaming, when they were talking about the mistakes that they did make and just not getting it at all. Really? They made no attempt to actually talk to the video game community, try to find out what people actually wanted. They just felt that they could just give you whatever, and because it had Amazon attached to it, you'd buy it. And while, yeah, they did finally understand that that's not going to work. Like, how many times did you have to be taught that lesson before you figured that it wasn't going to work? And an attempt to like disrupt Steam was like laughable. It's laughable that anyone would think to try to disrupt Steam at this point. Like, they are pretty much synonymous with PC gaming right now. Not that it can't be done, but the idea that you could just do no research and just wade in and be like, oh, I'm Amazon, I've got a big dick, and here's all my money, and we're just going to push you out of the market? No? Like, you just fully don't understand what Steam brings to the video game community in general. Anyway, Satya Nadella not talking about Xbox and also talking about video games? Bit concerning for Xbox. Can we still say it's concerning at this point, or can we just say, yeah, makes sense, Xbox is done, Xbox is dead? I don't know. It'll be a slow death, over time people will eventually just stop talking about the brand, I would imagine. Maybe it may end up just becoming a publisher label instead, when we won't be talking about the platforms anymore. It's just a publishing thing. We'll find out. Dueling different things for EA's approach to generative AI and Strauss Zelnick's Take-Two's opinions. Generative AI, either way, you're both wrong. Because it shouldn't be involved in anything, really. It just shouldn't. It's not ready, and arguably will never be ready. It's a gimmick, it's a fun little toy, and some people can find some uses for it. But for the most part, if it was as revolutionary as they're trying to claim, more revolutionary than the internet, or since the internet, or whatever the quote was, fuck off. No, it isn't. Not even close. Anyway, I forget what else we were talking about now. Yeah, I mean, Microsoft staying silent over the White House use of Halo, and I think there was also a generative AI thing with Trump as Master Chief or something like that. And they would be, they'd be crawling up your ass with lawyers if anybody else had done it. But because it's going to affect their generative AI shite, they're not going to say a damn thing. Which is, as I said, silence is approval. That's what it's taken as. Anyway, that's it from me. We'll be back next week with some more things. Until then, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you then. Bye.